My name is Thelma, and I am 68 years old. I'm standing in a dusty attic holding an old suitcase that belonged to my late husband. For 37 years, I called this house my home. I taught my son his first words in the living room downstairs. I watched him grow graduate and build his own family. And now, after everything I gave him, the only words he had for me were, "Mom, the attic is ready for you." But what I did the next morning changed everything. Before I share what happened next, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if stories about family betrayal and standing up for yourself resonate with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Trust me, you will want to hear every detail of what I did when my son tried to push me aside. Now let me take you back to where it all began. To understand why that moment in the attic broke something inside me, I need to tell you about this house and what it meant to me. Walter and I found this house in 1987. We were young, hopeful, and completely in love. I remember the first time we walked through the front door. It was a Victorian beauty with 5 bedrooms, a gray shingled roof, and stained glass windows on the staircase that cast little rainbows across the walls every afternoon. The backyard stretched out wide and open, and there was a wisteria vine climbing up the side porch that bloomed purple every spring. Walter was a construction engineer. He had hands that could fix anything and a heart that never stopped giving. We did not have much money back then, but we scraped together every penny we had for the down payment. I was teaching high school English at the time, grading papers late into the night while Walter worked overtime on construction sites across the state. For the first 10 years, Walter spent every weekend fixing up the house. He replaced the old plumbing himself. He sanded and refinished the hardwood floors by hand. He built a wooden swing for the front porch where we would sit together on summer evenings, watching the fireflies dance across the lawn. When our son Derek was born, Walter planted a magnolia tree in the front yard. He said every child deserves a tree that grows alongside them. That magnolia is still standing today, taller than the roof, now its branches spreading wide like arms reaching toward the sky. The kitchen was always my favorite room. It had an old farmhouse sink and pale yellow cabinets that Walter painted himself. That kitchen saw thousands of meals. I taught Derek how to make his first pancakes there when he was 6 years old. He flipped one too hard and it stuck to the ceiling. We laughed so hard that Walter nearly choked on his coffee. There is still a faint mark on that ceiling from the pancake incident. I never painted over it because it made me smile every time I looked up. Derek was our only child. The doctors told me after his difficult birth that I would not be able to have more children. It broke my heart at first, but I poured every ounce of love I had into that boy. I read to him every single night from the time he was an infant until he was 12 years old. I taught him to love books, to appreciate words, to find magic in stories. Being a teacher and a mother at the same time was exhausting. I would stay up until 2 in the morning grading essays from my students, then wake at 5 to make Derek breakfast before school. Walter traveled often for work, sometimes gone for weeks at a time on big construction projects. I managed the house, the bills, and our son all on my own during those stretches. There were nights I cried from exhaustion. There were moments I wanted to give up. But every time I looked at Derek sleeping peacefully in his bed, I found the strength to keep going. When Derek was in 7th grade, some older boys started bullying him. They called him names, stole his lunch money, and once pushed him into a locker so hard he came home with a bruise on his shoulder. I marched into that school the very next day. I sat in the principal's office and refused to leave until they addressed the situation. It took 3 months of meetings, phone calls, and persistence, but I made sure those boys were held accountable and Derek was protected. A few years later, I was offered an incredible opportunity. A publishing company wanted me to help write a new high school English textbook. It would have meant recognition, extra income, and a chance to shape education across the country. But it also meant traveling frequently and spending weeks away from home. I turned it down without hesitation. Derek was starting high school, and I knew those years were critical. I chose to be present for every football game, every parent-teacher conference, every late-night conversation about girls and friendships and dreams. I never regretted that choice. My son needed me, and I was there. When Derek graduated from college, I cried tears of pure joy. When he got his first real job at an insurance company, I threw him a celebration dinner and invited all our neighbors. I was so proud of the man he had become. Then came the hardest chapter of my life. 5 years ago, Walter was diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer. The doctors gave him 8 months. I refused to put him in a hospice facility. I set up a hospital bed in our bedroom, the same room where we had slept side by side for over 3 decades, and I cared for him myself until the very end. Those 8 months were brutal. I barely slept. I learned to change IV bags and administer medication. I held his hand through the pain, read him his favorite poems, and told him every single day that I loved him more than words could express. The night Walter passed, Derek sat beside me. He held my hand and made a promise that I will never forget. He said, "I will always take care of you, Mom. This house will always be your home." I believed him. I believed every word. After Walter died, I stayed in the house. It was full of memories, full of him. I could still smell his cologne on his old flannel shirts in the closet. I could still see his handwriting on the labels in the garage. The house was my connection to the life we had built together. I filled my days with gardening book clubs and visits from former students who had become lifelong friends. Derek called me every Sunday without fail. He brought the grandchildren over once a month. Life was quiet, but it was peaceful. I had no idea how quickly that peace would shatter. Derek met Priscilla at a company event 7 years ago. He called me the next day gushing about this incredible woman he had met. She was an interior designer, he said. Sophisticated, stylish, with impeccable taste. He was completely smitten. I was happy for him. Every mother wants her son to find love. But when I finally met Priscilla, something felt off. I could not quite put my finger on it at first. She was polite enough, always saying the right things, but there was a distance in her eyes when she looked at me. A coolness that never quite thawed. Priscilla was tall and slender with short brown hair that was always perfectly styled. She wore designer clothes even for casual dinners, and she had a way of surveying every room she entered like she was mentally redecorating it. The wedding was held at an expensive hotel downtown. When I offered to host the reception at our house, Priscilla smiled tightly and said, "That is so sweet of you, Thelma, but the venue really needs to match the aesthetic we are going for. The house is just a bit too old-fashioned." I swallowed my disappointment and smiled. I told myself she was just nervous about the wedding. I told myself she would warm up to me eventually. She never did. In all the years since that wedding, Priscilla has never once called me Mom. It is always just Thelma spoken in that flat, measured tone of hers, like she's addressing a distant acquaintance rather than her mother-in-law. Visits became less frequent after they married. Priscilla always had an excuse ready. Work was busy. The children had activities. They were renovating their condo. There was always something. When they did visit, Priscilla would make little comments about the house. "This wallpaper is so dated," she would say, running her fingers along the floral pattern in the dining room. Or, "Have you ever thought about updating the kitchen? These cabinets are straight out of the 80s. I tried to please her. I really did. I bought new dishes because she mentioned mine were chipped. I replaced the guest towels because she said they smelled musty. I even took down some of Walter's old photographs from the hallway because she said the frames were cluttering the space. Nothing was ever good enough. Then there were my grandchildren, Lily and Mason. When they were younger, they adored spending time with me. Lily used to beg her parents to let her sleep over at Grandma's house. Mason would follow me around the garden, asking questions about every flower and bug he saw. But as the years passed, Priscilla started limiting their time with me. She said they had too many activities. Dance lessons, soccer practice, tutoring sessions. Whenever I suggested taking them for a weekend, she would find a reason to say no. I spent hours knitting a purple scarf for Lily's 13th birthday. Purple was her favorite color, and I used the softest wool I could find. When I gave it to her at her birthday party, Priscilla took it from her hands before she could even try it on. "She is allergic to wool," Priscilla said, setting it aside on a table where it sat forgotten for the rest of the party. Lily was not allergic to wool. I knew that because I had given her a wool sweater just 2 years earlier that she wore constantly until she outgrew it. But I did not argue. I just smiled and pretended it did not hurt. Derek never defended me in these moments. He would look away uncomfortably or change the subject. The son who once promised to always take care of me seemed to have forgotten how to stand up for me. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening in October. The leaves outside were just starting to turn, and I was sitting in the living room with a cup of tea and a mystery novel. My phone rang, and Derek's name flashed on the screen. His voice sounded different, tighter, worried. "Mom, he said I need to talk to you about something. He told me the insurance company was restructuring. His department was being downsized, and his position was at risk. He was stressed about money, about the mortgage on their condo, about the children's private school tuition. My heart ached for him. Despite everything, he was still my son. Then he made a suggestion that seemed innocent at the time. Mom, Priscilla and I have been thinking, what if we moved in with you? The kids are getting bigger and they need more space. And you are all alone in that big house. It would be good for everyone." I should have been suspicious. I should have asked more questions. But all I heard was my son wanting to come home. I heard my grandchildren filling the empty rooms with laughter again. I heard the promise he made 5 years ago finally being fulfilled. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Yes, of course. Come home." That night, I could not sleep. But it was not from worry. It was from pure, foolish joy. I lay awake making plans in my head. I would fix up the spare bedrooms for Lily and Mason. I would cook all of Derek's favorite meals. I would finally have a family in this house again. I had no idea that I was opening my door to people who had already decided what they wanted from me. They moved in on a Saturday in late November. The moving truck arrived at 8 in the morning, and by noon, the house was filled with boxes, furniture, and the sound of footsteps everywhere. I had spent the entire week preparing. I bought new sheets for all the beds. I stocked the refrigerator with groceries. I even picked fresh flowers from the garden and put them in vases throughout the house. That first evening, I cooked a big family dinner, roast chicken with rosemary and garlic mashed potatoes, green beans from a farm stand down the road, and an apple pie for dessert. It was the kind of meal I used to make when Derek was growing up, the kind that filled the house with warmth and good smells. We sat around the dining table together, all 5 of us. Lily and Mason were excited about their new rooms. Derek seemed relaxed for the first time in months. Even Priscilla smiled and complimented the food, which was rare. "The house has good bones," she said, looking around the dining room. "Just needs some work." I should have paid more attention to that comment, but I was too happy to notice the warning signs. The first week went smoothly enough. We were all adjusting to living together, figuring out bathroom schedules and kitchen routines. I tried to stay out of everyone's way, keeping to my usual habits of gardening in the morning and reading in the afternoon. But by the second week, things started to change. Priscilla began suggesting improvements to the house. At first, they seemed minor. She thought the living room would look better if we moved the furniture around. She mentioned that the curtains were blocking too much light. Then, she brought in a decorator friend to help her reimagine the space. They stood in my living room pointing at walls and windows, speaking in hushed tones about color palettes and design schemes. A few days later, I came home from my book club meeting to find that the curtains were gone. The heavy velvet drapes that Walter and I had chosen together in 1995, the ones that matched the burgundy accent wall perfectly, had been replaced with sleek gray panels that looked like they belonged in a hotel lobby. Priscilla smiled when she saw my face. "We wanted to surprise you," she said. "The old ones were so heavy and dark. These let in so much more light." I stood there staring at the windows, feeling like a stranger in my own home, but I did not say anything. I told myself it was just curtains. I could adjust. A week later, the sofa disappeared. It was a large, comfortable sofa with floral upholstery. Walter used to lie on it every Sunday afternoon reading the newspaper and dozing off during football games. After he died, I would sometimes sit there just to feel close to him. When I asked where it had gone, Priscilla said they had moved it to the attic to make room for a new sectional she had ordered. More modern, she said. More functional for a family. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand they bring it back. But I looked at Derek, and he just shrugged apologetically. "She has a good eye for design, Mom. Trust her." So I stayed quiet. Again. Then came the wallpaper incident. The dining room had beautiful floral wallpaper that I had chosen when we first bought the house. It was delicate and feminine with soft pink roses and green vines against a cream background. I loved that wallpaper. It made the room feel like a garden. One afternoon, I came home to find 2 men in coveralls scraping it off the walls. Priscilla stood in the doorway, directing them like a general commanding her troops. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. Priscilla turned to me with that patient smile she used when she thought I was being difficult. "Surprise makeover," she said brightly. This pattern is so outdated. We are doing a fresh coat of paint instead. You will love it." By the end of the day, the walls were bare and white. The room that had felt like a garden now felt like a hospital. I went to my bedroom that night and cried for the first time since they had moved in. But it did not stop there. Priscilla started hosting dinner parties without telling me. I would come downstairs to find strangers in my living room drinking wine and admiring the renovations. She introduced the house as our new place, never mentioning that I was the one who owned it. She asked me to avoid using the kitchen in the mornings because she needed quiet space to work remotely. She complained about the smell of my cooking, saying it was too strong for the children. She rescheduled my book club meetings that I had been hosting for 15 years because they conflicted with her work calls. I was being pushed out of my own life, one small request at a time. Then came the conversation about the bedroom. Priscilla announced one evening that she and Derek needed the master bedroom. It had the best view, the most space, and the nicest bathroom. It made sense for them to have it. But that bedroom was where Walter and I had slept for 37 years. That was where I had held his hand as he took his last breath. That room was sacred to me. I tried to explain. I told Derek how much that room meant to me, how I could still feel his father's presence there. He listened with a pained expression, then said something that cut me deeper than any knife. "Mom, you cannot live in the past forever. Dad is gone. It is just a room. Just a room. 37 years of marriage reduced to just a room." I moved out the next day. I packed my clothes, my photographs, my few remaining personal items, and carried them down to the small guest room on the first floor. It had been Walter's study. His books were still on the shelves, his old desk still sat by the window. At least I would have that. As I was settling in, I passed the living room and heard Priscilla on the phone with someone. "The house is worth at least $2 million, she said in a low voice. "Location is everything. Once we settle in properly, things will fall into place." I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding. What did she mean by that? What things would fall into place? I told myself I was being paranoid. Priscilla was just talking about real estate in general. She was an interior designer after all. She probably discussed property values all the time, but a seed of doubt had been planted, and it would soon grow into something I could no longer ignore. The night I discovered the truth started like any other. I had gone to bed early, exhausted from another day of feeling invisible in my own home. But sometime after 11, I woke up with a terrible thirst. My throat was dry and scratchy, probably from the dust the renovations had stirred up. I got out of bed and padded quietly toward the kitchen. The house was dark, except for a faint glow coming from the living room. I assumed someone had left a lamp on, but as I got closer, I heard voices. Derek and Priscilla were sitting on the new sectional, a laptop open on the coffee table in front of them. The screen showed a video call with a man I did not recognize. He was wearing a suit and had the polished look of a professional. I stopped in the hallway, hidden in the shadows, and listened. "How long until we can add our names to the deed?" Priscilla asked the man on the screen. "If she agrees to a joint ownership arrangement, it simplifies everything considerably," he replied. "That way you would have legal standing as co-owners. Otherwise, you will have to wait for other circumstances." Other circumstances. I felt my stomach turn. Derek leaned forward. "She trusts me," he said. "I can convince her to sign. She does not really understand legal stuff anyway. I will just tell her it is for tax purposes or something." Priscilla nodded. "Once our names are on the deed, we can refinance. The equity in this house is at least $1.8 million. We can use that to pay off our debts and fund the kids' education." I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. My legs had gone weak and my heart was pounding so hard I was sure they would hear it. They were not here to take care of me. They were here to take my house. The man on the screen continued speaking, but I could barely hear him over the roaring in my ears. I backed away slowly, carefully, terrified of making a sound. When I finally reached my room, I closed the door and leaned against it, struggling to breathe. All those promises Derek had made. All those sweet words about wanting to be close to me, about the children needing more space. It was all a lie, a calculated, heartless lie. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment since they had moved in. Every small humiliation, every dismissive comment, every piece of my life they had erased. It all made sense now. The next morning, I forced myself to act normal. I made coffee, said good morning, smiled at the grandchildren. Derek came into the kitchen holding a folder. "Mom," he said casually, "I have some paperwork I need you to look at. Priscilla's accountant says it would help with taxes if we were all on the same deed. You know, for estate planning purposes." I took the folder from him without meeting his eyes. "Let me read through it carefully," I said. "I will sign it later." He looked slightly annoyed, but nodded. "Just do not take too long. The accountant needs it back by the end of the week." After he left for work, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the folder. The documents were dense with legal language, but I understood enough to know what they were asking for. If I signed these papers, Derek and Priscilla would become co-owners of the house, and with 2 signatures against one, they could force a sale whenever they wanted. I closed the folder and picked up my phone. I needed help. I needed someone I could trust. Dorothy answered on the second ring. She was my oldest friend, a fellow retired teacher who had stood by me through Walter's illness and death. Her son was a lawyer specializing in estate planning. When I arrived at her house an hour later, she took one look at my face and knew something was terribly wrong. I handed her the documents and told her everything I had heard the night before. She read through the papers slowly, her expression growing darker with each page. "Thelma," she said finally, "if you sign this, you are handing them your house. They could force you out within a year." I started to cry. For the first time since Walter died, I sobbed openly, letting all the pain and betrayal pour out of me. Dorothy held me and let me cry until I had no tears left. Then she said something I will never forget. "You have 2 choices, Thelma. You can confront them and hope they back down, which we both know they will not do, or you can protect yourself. This house is yours, only yours. Do not let them take it from you." I drove home that afternoon with a new clarity. The fog of denial had lifted. I saw my situation for what it truly was. My son, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, was trying to steal my home, but I was not going to let him. The final blow came 2 weeks later. Priscilla announced at dinner that she needed my room, the small study on the first floor where I had retreated after giving up the master bedroom. She wanted to convert it into a design studio for her work. I stared at her across the table. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked. She exchanged a glance with Derek. He cleared his throat. "Mom, we have been thinking. The attic has a lot of potential. We cleaned it up, added some furniture. It is actually quite nice up there. More private. You would have your own space." "The attic." They wanted me to live in the attic. I looked at my son, searching for some sign that this was a joke, but his face was serious, almost impatient. "It is temporary," he said. "Just until we figure out the best arrangement for everyone." The best arrangement for everyone. Everyone except me. I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic that evening, carrying 2 suitcases and a box of photographs. The ceiling was low-sloping sharply on both sides. There was one small window that looked out over the backyard. The floor was bare wood, and despite their claims of cleaning, there was still a musty smell in the air. I sat on the narrow bed they had placed against the wall, surrounded by boxes of old holiday decorations and forgotten furniture. This was what my life had come to. 68 years old, pushed into the attic of my own home like a piece of unwanted storage. I looked down at my hands, wrinkled and spotted with age. These hands had graded thousands of papers. They had held my newborn son. They had stroked my dying husband's face. They had built a life in this house, memory by memory, year by year, and now those same hands were being asked to sign away everything I had worked for. I thought about Walter. I remembered his voice on our last anniversary together, just weeks before his diagnosis. He had looked at me across the dinner table and said, "This house is your castle, Thelma. Never let anyone take your crown." I had laughed at the time. It had seemed like such a silly, romantic thing to say. But sitting in that attic in the darkness of that November night, I finally understood what he meant. I was a queen, and I was done being treated like a servant. I woke at 5 the next morning with a clarity I had not felt in months. The house was silent. Everyone else was still asleep. I crept down the attic stairs through the hallway past the closed door of what used to be my bedroom and into the kitchen. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the table watching the first gray light of dawn creep across the yard. The magnolia tree stood tall and still, its bare branches reaching toward the pale sky. Walter had planted that tree the day Derek was born. He said every child deserves a tree that grows alongside them. I wondered what he would think if he could see how that child had turned out. I finished my tea and picked up my phone. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. I searched for real estate agents in Philadelphia. I read reviews, checked credentials, compared ratings. One name kept appearing at the top of every list. Henry Whitfield, 30 years of experience, specializing in historic homes and estate properties. 5 stars across the board. I dialed his number at 7:15. A professional voice answered, asking me to leave a message. I kept it brief. My name is Thelma. I have a Victorian home in the suburbs. 5 bedrooms. Original features. I need it listed today. Please call me back as soon as possible. I hung up and sat back, my heart racing. There was no turning back now. Henry called me at 9 o'clock sharp. His voice was warm and businesslike at the same time, exactly what I needed, Mrs. Thelma, he said, I am very interested in your property. When can I come see it? Today, I said. Can you come at 10? My family will be out of the house. He arrived precisely on time. He was a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a navy blazer and carried a leather portfolio under his arm. I gave him a tour of the house, pointing out all the original features that Derek and Priscilla had not yet managed to destroy. The stained glass windows, the hardwood floors, the crown molding in the parlor, the fireplace mantels with their hand-carved details. Henry took notes and photographs, nodding appreciatively at each detail. When we walked outside, he stopped in front of the magnolia tree. This is magnificent, he said. You do not see trees like this anymore? How old is it? 44 years, I said. My husband planted it the day our son was born. He looked at me with understanding in his eyes. He did not ask why I was selling. Good real estate agents know when to ask questions and when to stay silent. We went back inside and sat at the kitchen table. Henry opened his portfolio and pulled out some papers. Mrs. Thelma, he said, based on my assessment, I believe this property is worth approximately $2.3 million. The location, the lot size, the original Victorian features, the mature landscaping. It is a rare find. $2.3 million. I had known the house was valuable, but hearing the number spoken aloud still took my breath away. I want it listed today, I said, and I want it sold as fast as possible. He looked at me carefully. Are you certain? Once we list it, things will move quickly. This type of property attracts serious buyers. I am certain, I said. More certain than I have been about anything in a long time. We signed the listing agreement right there at my kitchen table. The same table where I had fed my family for 37 years. The same table where Derek had done his homework, where Walter and I had shared our morning coffee, where I had taught Lily to play cards. After Henry left, I sat alone in the quiet house, looking around at everything I was about to leave behind. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But the pain of losing the house was nothing compared to the pain of losing my son. That afternoon, I made another phone call. Franklin Dorsey was an estate attorney that Dorothy's son had recommended. He was older, experienced, and known for being thorough. I explained my situation. I told him about Derek and Priscilla, about the documents they wanted me to sign, about the conversation I had overheard, about being pushed into the attic. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he let out a long breath. Mrs. Thelma, he said, you have done exactly the right thing. The house is solely in your name. Your late husband's will left everything to you. No one else has any legal claim to this property. You are free to sell it whenever you choose, and if they refuse to leave after the sale, then the new owners can begin eviction proceedings. But in my experience, once people realize the house is sold, they tend to leave on their own, especially if they were counting on taking it from you. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For weeks I had been paralyzed by guilt and uncertainty. Now I had a plan, and I had the law on my side. The next 2 weeks were the strangest of my life. I continued living in the attic, pretending everything was normal. Every morning I would climb down those narrow stairs, make breakfast, exchange pleasantries with Derek and Priscilla, and act like I had not just sold their supposed inheritance out from under them. Every day while they were at work and the children were at school, I packed a little more. Photo albums went into boxes. Walter's old letters went into my suitcase. The jewelry my mother had left me, the quilts my grandmother had sewn, the first edition book Walter had given me on our 10th anniversary. Piece by piece, I separated my life from the house. I rented a 2-bedroom condo on the other side of town, close to Dorothy. It was small but bright, with a balcony overlooking a community garden. I paid 6 months' rent up front and had my essential furniture delivered there in secret. Meanwhile, Henry worked his magic. He scheduled private showings when Derek and Priscilla were away. He screened buyers carefully, looking for someone who would appreciate the house's history. 10 days after listing, he called with good news. "We have an offer," he said. "A young couple. He is a surgeon at the university hospital. She is a pediatrician. They are expecting their first child. They fell in love with the house immediately, especially the magnolia tree. They offered $2.35 million above asking price with a closing date in 3 weeks. "Take it," I said without hesitation. I went to Henry's office the next day to sign the paperwork. As I wrote my name on each page, I thought about Walter. I thought about all the dreams we had when we bought this house. I thought about the life we built and the life I was now walking away from. But I also thought about the woman I had become in recent months. The woman who apologized for existing. The woman who let herself be pushed from room to room until she ended up in an attic. That woman was not the real me. The real me was the teacher who stood up to bullies, the wife who cared for her dying husband, the mother who sacrificed everything for her child. It was time for that woman to come back. The confrontation came on a Friday evening, 3 weeks after I signed the listing agreement, and just 2 weeks before closing. Derek came home early from work. I heard his car pull into the driveway, then the front door open and close. His footsteps echoed through the house as he climbed the stairs. He knocked on the attic door with a cheerful rhythm. "Mom, are you up there?" I opened the door. He was standing on the narrow landing holding a large paper bag that smelled of garlic and tomatoes. "Dinner is on me tonight," he said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "I got takeout from that Italian place you like. The one with the mushroom risotto. Come down and eat with us." It was the first time in weeks he had invited me to dinner. I knew why. The unsigned documents were still sitting on his desk. He was trying to soften me up. "That is very thoughtful, Derek," I said evenly. "I will be right down." I followed him to the kitchen where Priscilla was already setting out plates. The children were at a sleepover, so it was just the 3 of us. The atmosphere felt strange, artificially pleasant, like a stage set for a scene we were all pretending to believe in. We sat down. Derek served the food with exaggerated care. Priscilla poured wine and asked me polite questions about my day. They were performing kindness like actors in a play. I ate slowly, savoring each bite. The risotto was good, creamy and rich with mushrooms, just the way I liked it. I wondered how many more meals I would eat in this kitchen. As the dinner wound down, Derek steered the conversation toward business. "Mom," he said casually, "did you get a chance to look at those papers? The accountant has been asking about them." Priscilla leaned forward slightly, her eyes bright with anticipation. I set down my fork and looked at both of them. "Actually, I have something to tell you." Derek's smile flickered. "What is it?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded document. It was a copy of the sales contract, the one I had signed 2 weeks earlier. "I sold the house," I said. The words hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, no one moved. Derek laughed nervously. "Very funny, Mom. I am not joking," I said. "I listed the house the morning after you asked me to move into the attic. I found a buyer. Closing is in 2 weeks. $2.3 million. Derek's face went white. The smile vanished like it had never existed. You cannot do that," he stammered. Priscilla stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "This is insane. You cannot just sell a house without telling us. We live here." I looked at her calmly. "No, Priscilla. You stay here. There is a difference. This house is in my name. Only my name. Walter left it to me, and I can do whatever I want with it." Derek was shaking his head, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Mom, please. Think about what you are doing. Think about the kids. Where are we supposed to go?" "You should have thought about that," I said, "before you asked your mother to live in the attic." Priscilla rounded on Derek, her composure cracking. "I told you we should have gotten her to sign those papers first. I told you to move faster." Derek shot her a furious look, not helping Priscilla. I watched them turn on each other with a strange sense of detachment. These were the people who had plotted to take my home, who had treated me like an obstacle to be managed, who had looked at 37 years of my life and seen nothing but dollar signs. I know everything I said quietly. They both froze and looked at me. I heard you, I continued, that night when you were talking to the lawyer on video call, about adding your names to the deed, about refinancing the equity, about how I do not understand legal stuff. Derek's face crumpled. Mom, I can explain. There is nothing to explain, I said. You moved into my home under false pretenses. You pushed me out of my bedroom, out of my kitchen, out of my life. You wanted me to sign over my house so you could cash out my life's work. And when I resisted, you put me in the attic, like I was something to be stored away until you were ready to dispose of me. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how calm I felt. All the anger and hurt I had been carrying for months had crystallized into something hard and clear. I gave you everything, Derek, I said. I worked double shifts so you could go to college. I sold my mother's ring to pay for your MBA. I turned down opportunities so I could be there for every moment of your childhood. And this is how you repay me. Derek had tears streaming down his face now. Mom, I am sorry. I do not know what happened to me. I do not know how I became this person. Neither do I said. But I know this. Your father would be heartbroken if he could see you now. I stood up from the table. The new owners take possession in 2 weeks. You have until then to find somewhere else to live. Derek reached for my arm. Mom, please, can we talk about this? Can we work something out? I looked at his hand on my sleeve, then up at his face. He looked like a frightened child. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old maternal instinct, the urge to comfort and forgive. But then I remembered the attic, the cold, the dust, the loneliness, the way they had erased my presence from my own home piece by piece. I pulled my arm away gently. I am leaving tonight, I said. I have already moved my things. My lawyer will handle the rest of the closing process. I walked to the front door where my coat and purse were waiting. I had placed them there that morning knowing this moment would come. As I opened the door, I looked back one last time at the house I had loved for 37 years, the stained glass windows, the hardwood floors, the kitchen where I had made thousands of meals, the walls that held decades of memories. Then I looked at Derek, standing in the hallway with tears on his face and desperation in his eyes. I gave you everything, I said softly. But you forgot that everything was mine to give. I stepped outside into the cool November night. The magnolia tree stood tall and dark against the sky, its branches bare, but its roots deep and strong. I walked to the taxi waiting at the curb, got in, and did not look back. That was 8 months ago. I live in my condo now. It is small compared to the Victorian house, just 2 bedrooms and a galley kitchen. But it is mine, truly mine, and no one can take it from me. The balcony overlooks a community garden where I have claimed a small plot. I grow tomatoes in the summer and chrysanthemums in the fall. My neighbors are friendly, mostly other retirees who wave and chat when we pass in the hallways. I used part of the money from the house sale to buy the condo outright. Another portion went into safe investments that will keep me comfortable for the rest of my life, and I set aside a significant amount to establish the Walter Harrison Memorial Scholarship Fund at the high school where I used to teach. Every year it will help a student who loves literature but cannot afford college. Walter would have liked that. Dorothy and I see each other almost every day now. We take walks in the park, attend book club meetings, and spend long afternoons drinking tea and talking about our lives. She was right beside me through the hardest moments, and I will never forget her loyalty. I have made new friends, too. There is a group of women in my building who meet every Wednesday for cards and conversation. Some of them have their own stories of family betrayal and hard choices. We understand each other in ways that people from happier circumstances might not. Last month, I took a trip to North Carolina to visit my sister Gloria. We spent a week together cooking meals, looking through old photographs, and talking about our childhood. One afternoon, we drove to the beach and watched the sunset over the ocean. It was the first time in years I had felt truly peaceful. Gloria asked me if I was happy. I thought about it for a long moment. Then I said yes. Not the happiness I imagined I would have in my old age surrounded by family in my beloved home, but a different kind of happiness, the happiness of knowing my own worth, the happiness of standing up for myself when it mattered most. Lily and Mason still call me. Not as often as I would like, but they call. I do not badmouth their parents to them. Children should not have to choose sides or carry the weight of adult conflicts. When Lily asked me why I sold the house, I told her the truth as gently as I could. Sometimes, sweetheart, I said, we have to leave a place to find ourselves again. I love that house, but I love myself too. And I needed to remember that. She nodded slowly, processing my words. Then, she said something that made my heart swell. I want to be strong like you when I grow up, Grandma. I hugged her tight and told her she already was. About 2 months ago, Derek came to see me. He looked different. Thinner, older, with dark circles under his eyes and a weariness in his posture that I had never seen before. He stood at my door, hesitant and uncertain, like a stranger asking for directions. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I let him in. We sat in my small living room and he told me everything. Priscilla had filed for separation. She blamed him for the loss of the house, for the failure of their scheme. Their marriage had been built on ambition and appearances, and when both crumbled, there was nothing left to hold them together. Derek had been seeing a therapist trying to understand how he had strayed so far from the person he used to be. He talked about the pressure he had felt, the fear of failure, the way Priscilla's expectations had warped his judgment. He did not make excuses, but he tried to explain. And then he apologized. "I am so sorry, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "I do not know how I became this person. Dad would be so ashamed of me." I sat across from my son, this middle-aged man who had once been a baby in my arms, a boy at my kitchen table, a young man full of promise and potential. I saw all the versions of him layered together, and I felt a complicated mixture of love and grief. "Your father would be sad," I said finally. "But he would also want you to learn from this." Derek nodded, wiping his eyes. "Can you ever forgive me I did not answer right away? Forgiveness is not a light switch you can flip on command. It is a journey sometimes, a long one." "I am willing to try," I said. "But it will take time, and it will take you showing me, not just telling me that you have changed." He accepted that. We did not hug or make dramatic promises. He finished his tea, thanked me for listening, and left. But before he walked out the door, he turned back. "I love you, Mom," he said. "I never stopped loving you. I just forgot how to show it." I nodded. "I know, son. I know." I think about that conversation often. I do not know what the future holds for Derek and me. Maybe we will rebuild our relationship piece by piece like his father once rebuilt our house. Maybe the damage is too deep to fully repair. Only time will tell. But I do know this. I am no longer the woman who accepts mistreatment in silence. I am no longer the mother who sacrifices her dignity for the sake of keeping peace. I have learned that loving someone does not mean letting them destroy you. Boundaries are not walls, I wrote in my journal last week. They are the fence around a garden. They do not stop love from growing. They protect what is precious inside. I still miss the house sometimes. I miss the magnolia tree that Walter planted. I miss the stained glass windows and the front porch swing. I miss the kitchen where so many memories were made, but I do not regret selling it. That house was full of Walter, full of our history together. But it had also become a trap, a tool for people who wanted to use me. Letting it go was the hardest thing I have ever done and also the most liberating. I have a photograph of the house on my bookshelf. Not the house as it looked at the end, stripped of everything that made it ours. The house as it was in 1992 when Derek was a teenager and Walter was healthy and we were a happy family. The magnolia tree is small in that picture, barely taller than the porch railing. I look at that photograph sometimes and remember who I was. A young teacher, a devoted wife, a loving mother, a woman who built a life from nothing and made it beautiful. I am still that woman, just older, wiser, and a little more protective of my heart. The new owners of the house send me updates occasionally. They had a baby girl last spring. They planted a garden in the backyard and fixed up the old wisteria vine. They love the magnolia tree and understand its history. I am glad the house found a good family, a family that will fill it with new memories and new love. That is what a house is for, after all. Not to be hoarded or schemed over, but to shelter the people who cherish it. So here I am at 68 years old, starting over in a way I never expected. It is not the life I planned, but it is a good life, a peaceful life, a life I can be proud of. My son asked me to stay in the attic, so I sold the house the next morning for $2.3 million. He came home with takeout and a smug dinner is on me, only to find that everything had changed. But here is the truth I want to leave you with. The real value was not in the money. It was in learning that I deserve more than a dusty corner of my own existence. It was in remembering that I am the author of my story and I can always turn the page. If you are out there right now letting someone make you feel small, letting them push you into corners, you do not belong. I want you to hear me. You matter. Your dignity matters. Your peace matters. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who should love you but choose to hurt you instead. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to start over. You are allowed to choose yourself. So I ask you, are you living in someone else's attic? Are you letting people who should treasure you treat you like something to be hidden away? If you are, remember this. You have the power to reclaim your life. You just have to take the first step. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. If this resonated with you, I would love to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up to someone you loved in order to protect yourself? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who is going through something similar. If you found value in this video, please take a moment to hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. And if you are not subscribed yet, please join our community. We share stories every week about real people facing real challenges and finding their strength. Do not forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. You never know who is sitting in their own attic waiting for permission to reclaim their life. Until next time, take care of yourself. Set your boundaries, remember your worth, and never let anyone make you feel like you deserve less than love and respect. I am wishing you peace, strength, and the courage to write your own next chapter.